Namaste, it's Sahara Rose, and welcome back to the Highest Self podcast, a place where we discuss what makes you your soul's highest evolvement. I'm so excited to share with you this week's episode because it's a practice that so many of you guys have asked me about, and Katie is truly an expert in, and that is journaling and self-expression. So Katie is the author of Let It Out, A Journey Through Journaling, and has so much wisdom on this topic, as well as general self-care, self-awareness, dealing with eating disorders, how sometimes a cleanse that you go on can slip into orthorexia without you even realizing it, and the different spectrums of relationships that we have with our bodies that we talk about in the episode today. So I'm so excited to share this week's episode with you. She's such an amazing light and just such a sweet girl. You can hear it in her voice. She's just pure light. And first, I want to give a little shout out to this week's podcast sponsor, and that is Four Sigmatic. Four Sigmatic is a mushroom elixir company. They basically take mushrooms, medicinal versions of them, and make them really easy to ingest by putting them in little packets with different flavors from coffee to rosehip, peppermint, and they're absolutely sugar-free. They use a little bit of natural stevia or not at all, and each mushroom has such unique benefits. I've been speaking about how I take the reishi mushroom kind every day. It's caffeine free and it's really good for treating adrenal fatigue. So adrenal fatigue happens when you're overly stressed out, you're sleeping late, you have too many things going on, and you start noticing that you're just kind of tired throughout the day. Then at night, suddenly you have lots of energy. You may feel like you're working out, but you're still gaining weight, especially around your your stomach area. That's the cortisol related area. So I learned that I had that last November, and I've been taking reishi mushroom because it's so helpful for just soothing down your entire adrenal and your nervous system, which I think we all could use a little bit more of. Their most popular one is their coffee one. So they basically take actual coffee and they add cordyceps, which is a very energizing mushroom in there. So you feel lots of energy, but it's not just from the caffeine, it's actually from the mushroom. So they have so many amazing kinds. I actually interviewed the founder on episode 48, which you can check out. And they're offering 15% off for Highest Self podcast listeners, which is pretty amazing. So all you got to do is go on foursigmatic.com/Sahara. It's spelled foursigmatic.com/Sahara, SAHARA, and you'll get 15% off your order, and you'll super love it, especially while you're journaling. So Katie Dalebout, she's freaking amazing, and she just has so much wisdom. I think so many of us, we have so many suppressed emotions, and we're all going through so much. I mean, I talked about this in episode 50, especially right now, energetically, it's like a intense time for the world globally on a single level, because the microcosm is a reflection of the macrocosm. So whatever's going on outside is going on within. So right now it's a lot of turbulence. We're deep in Kali Yuga, which was the era in the Vedic times where things get crazy. So it's really important that we have outlets that we can just express ourselves and not feel judged. And I think journaling is a really amazing tool. I love going through my old laptops and phones because I see so many notes that I took at that time of my life. Like when I went to India this past December to shoot photography for my upcoming book, Eat, Feel Fresh. I went back to Kerala, a place that I had studied Ayurveda. I was there by myself like 5 years ago, and I sat on the exact same swing, and I remembered in my phone I wrote this whole poem about how we're all stuck in boxes, and we go from one box, which is our cars, to another box, which is our desks, and another one which is our cubicles, and all about how we're just boxed and everything. So I went through my phone and I realized I still had the note. It had transferred through the phones that I've had since then. And I reread it and I was like, wow, I was just transported to that time and place, and thinking how much I've changed, though I still agree. But reading the tones of that, it was still coming from a place of a lot of anger of why are they putting us in this box? This isn't fair. I'm not supposed to be in this box. Till now it's yeah, of course I'm not supposed to be in the box. Duh, I'm over here. So it's amazing to go back and just see where you were at different points in your life and how you're the same person, but also such a different person. So Katie also gives us really good advice about Do you need to go through your past journals? What are different ways that you can get your creative juices flowing? So it's super, super helpful. So I hope you guys enjoy. Feel free to share at the end on the Mind Body Balancers Facebook group. This is where we discuss how you enjoyed the episode, what's going on for you. I'd love if you shared what journaling practices that you use, and I'll see you guys on the other side. Enjoy. Welcome, Katie. It's so great to have you here on the Highest Self podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. We were just chatting before this about both of us running from thing to thing. So I'm so glad I'm here and to be with you.
Yes, and I'm sure everyone listening is running to something. I think podcasts are the thing we all listen to, and we're stuck in traffic and it's just
en route. Yes.
Yeah, which is why I think they're blowing up, because there's just so much of that in between time these days.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yes. I love the medium so much.
Yeah. So the first question that I'm going to ask you, that I ask everyone, is what makes you your highest self?
The first thing that comes to mind is presence. When thinking about that question, what comes to mind is all of the times when I'm not my highest self, and I can list off a couple right off the bat. And it's whenever I'm basically unconscious. So it's when I'm, an uncomfortable feeling comes up and I turn to a coping mechanism, right? And so for me, those are usually turning to food emotionally, or turning to controlling my food and, eating or not eating, or recently it's been turning to work in an unhealthy way, or my phone, it's when we want to tap out of life, right? It's when I want to unconsciously scroll through Instagram or unconsciously check my phone again. It's we don't want to just be with ourselves. And so that's when I'm being my not most enlightened best version of myself. And I think all the times when I am the best version of myself, which is I think what you call your highest self, that's when I'm present and when I'm content and when I'm creative. So I think my highest self first starts with presence. It's being with whatever feeling or emotion I have and just sitting with it. And I think I feel my most connected, most highest self, like I said, when I'm present, and usually with some element of creativity. And I know you love and Deepak Chopra, and I heard him say once in a video that happiness he defines as divine discontent, to leave room for the creative impulse. And so that's something that I think about all the time. And I think I honestly feel my high self when I'm connecting with another person, just like we are right now. We're not on our phones. I host a podcast too, and it's my favorite time where I feel the most connected, because you're forced to be present. If I'm zoning out during this conversation, I sound silly and I sound like I'm not there, because I'm not. Or if I turn to my phone or whatever, that would be rude. So this is, I think, when I feel my highest self.
Totally. And I totally agree. And I haven't heard that quote of Deepak before. And I love it so much. And I think it's so funny, because almost everyone that comes on, it's creativity always comes through. So I think it's when we're aligned, when we're being present, creativity is just the blessing that comes out of that.
Yeah, I think so too. You can't really force creativity. I think it just you can't make it happen. You just have to fall upon it.
Absolutely. And your book, Let It Out, I was going through it and I just love all of the journaling prompts. So will you tell us a little bit about your book and your journey to writing it?
Thanks so much. That's so nice. Yeah, my book came out in 2016, over a year ago now. And it came out with Hay House. It's called Let It Out, which is also the name of my podcast. And so I had a blog that I started in college as a Tumblr. It was called The Wellness Wonderland. And I taught yoga through college as a college job. And I started doing yoga in high school. And so I was kind of into wellnessy things. And I had this idea of a name of a blog come to me, The Wellness Wonderland, in a yoga class. It really grew from there. And I just loved doing it. I loved reading other people's blogs, from fashion blogs and lifestyle blogs and design blogs to wellnessy blogs. And I kind of created something in between where it was kind of my wonderland of anything that inspired me. But meanwhile, funnily enough, or actually not very funny, I had an eating disorder. And when I went in at the end of college and when I was in treatment for that, I kind of came out of treatment for that eating disorder through the lens of orthorexia. So I went too far into wellness and health to the point where it wasn't good for me. My self-care practices were actually making me more sick, and they were making me more disconnected from other human beings. And this all meanwhile, I had this blog called The Wellness Wonderland. So it was kind of an interesting situation. And then that ended up growing into a podcast because, like I said, I love the medium, and it was after I graduated from college, and so I was spending more time alone than I ever had. So I found listening to podcasts very comforting. And same thing kind of happened as with blogging. I was like, oh, I could do that. And I had a boyfriend at the time who was like very tech savvy. So like next thing I know, I had a microphone and a podcast on iTunes, and I would interview a really diverse plethora of guests about their holistic wellness practices and things that made them feel good. And what I realized from that is that it was all so different, because thank God body diversity exists and we all are such different people, which is so great. Which is why I love your work with Ayurveda, because it really speaks to that. But I listened to all these people telling me how they do all of these different practices, and it helped me to really get out of my very rigid, very dogmatic way of being around food and diet. And it helped me learn, questioning weight as a social issue, and dieting and the diet industry being, something really corrupt, actually. And I looked at it from a feminist perspective on, why is it that from the time I was 9 years old, I wanted my body to be smaller than it was? And, why was it? Well, maybe because the media only shows one type of person for you to look up to, primarily white, thin women as people portrayed in the media. And luckily that's changing very, very slowly. But, at the time, the only fat character that I ever remembered seeing in media was Ursula in The Little Mermaid, and she was evil, So anyway, it really shifted my perspective to, learn about how we are so unique as individuals and our bodies and our sizes. And that's beautiful. Life would be so boring if we all looked exactly the same. And I learned this really through my podcast and developing more self-awareness. And no one actually told me to start journaling. But during this time, I started writing down my authentic, raw and real feelings and emotions, kind of like what I was talking about at the beginning about, not wanting to feel our feelings. We want to cope, we want to run from our feelings, but I went right into them, which is very uncomfortable. And I started to journal them. I started to write them down, and that at least slowed them down from happening in my mind. I could get them out of my head onto paper, which is why it's called Let It Out, which is something like my mom would say to me when I was sick as a kid, like, let it out, let it out. Like if you need to throw up, just let it out. And it's the same thing with the thoughts in your mind. You got to let them out so they can get out of you. And then you can, sort through them, decide which ones are holding you back, which ones you want to listen to. And this was really helping me. This was a process that was really cathartic for me. And so I started to kind of recommend it to friends. And I was like, if they were going through a breakup or whatever, I'd be like, hey, I know it's kind of weird, but like, have you ever tried journaling? Like, I find it really helpful. And they were like, no, I'm not a writer. I wouldn't have anything to say. And I was like, well, I'm not a writer. And I didn't really have anything to say, but I found it helpful and it gave me relief. So I started giving them prompts and questions. And eventually I ended up getting a book deal. And my book is, like you said, 55 journaling prompts. They're journaling exercises in all areas of life. So there's tools about organization, there's tools about relationships, there's a lot of tools about body image and food and mindfulness, and there's tools about spirituality and kind of everything in between. And it's the tools that I gave my friends, and they're questions that if you ask yourself a good question, you'll get a good answer from your intuition. And it's something that's been so beneficial to me, and I'm so happy that the book is out there. And thank you so much for checking it out.
Oh, of course. And I just so agree with everything that you say, and really believe that it's just about asking yourself the right questions, because we already know the answer. And sometimes we just have so many blocks that we've set up that are preventing us from accessing that truth. And it's just like allowing yourself to go down that rabbit hole, however painful it may be, because at the very bottom of it is always beauty. So,
yeah. And we want to avoid it. And like, it's very uncomfortable to just be present with ourselves. But like I said at the beginning, that's when we can connect with other people.
I love
And that's when
that.
we can connect with ourselves. Yeah.
So when you were writing this book, how did you come up with the different journaling prompts? Were they things that you had used yourself, or just were you like thinking of every kind of person in every situation and what could be the right questions for them? Like, what did that process look like?
No, I wish I was like Superwoman and made this for other people, but I really didn't. I say in the, what is that called? The dedication, I guess. I have your beautiful book right next to me. I wonder if you have a dedication. But in the dedication, I said, I dedicated it to the listeners of my podcast. Because I've been doing my podcast since 2013. So I really have been doing it, but pre-serial, before like anyone knew what podcasts were. And I really wrote the book for the people who listen to my podcast. But then I was like, I wrote this book for you. And then I was like, no, actually I wrote it for me. But then I realized it would also help you, so here you go, or something like that.
So honest.
Thanks. Yeah. So basically, it was whenever I would journal or whenever I would get an idea about something, I would write it. This was like the year I wrote the book when I was 22. Or I got the book too when I was 22. I wrote it when I was 23 years old. Whenever I would like have an idea, I could be like walking or hiking or driving even, and I would write it down in the note section of my iTelephone. And that's how each journal came to be. And they were things, like my friend was going through this breakup and I wrote like a really long email to her and it had lots of questions. And that's where one tool came from. Other things that have helped me. In each section of the book, it's in like 5 chapters, I think, I have like a personal essay of like kind of something memoir-ish about my life and what these tools meant to me. But there was so much editing. I had the most beautiful, amazing editor. Her name is Lindsay, and she really helped me organize the book and put it in a way that's most useful to people. But really the tools I didn't really think about other people when I was writing it. I thought about what was helpful for me and a couple of my friends, but mostly for me. And what I find is that, the human experience, and I'm sure you know this too, isn't all that different for each other. Like what is helpful to me, other people connect with. And that's my only area of expertise is myself. So I couldn't really write it for other people if I tried.
So true. And I think it's like if we all just like practice like self-mastery, like that's the most helpful thing we can do for other people as well.
Yeah. I mean, I often say my only goal in life is to get better at being myself.
I love that. And I think, we all get like so caught up and like, I need to like help all these people and this and that. And it's like you, through helping yourself, have helped a lot of other people, but that's never been like the thing that you're going out for. It's just, how can I be the best Katie possible today?
Agree. And they're not separate.
Yes.
I think that's like a big thing. Yeah.
I love that. And did you do the Hay House? Like, I feel like I read somewhere you won the award. They have those different things that they do. Yeah. So what was that process like? Because I know tons of people listening love Hay House books, or I talk a lot about how I got my book deal. So I think they'd love to hear about yours, because I think Cassandra Bodzak, who's a mutual friend of ours, she also won the Hay Houses thing. So can you explain what that is?
Yes, I can definitely explain it. So it's funny. I have the story of how my book came to be in the introduction of my book. And it was in the afterword, but my editor was like, that's a crazy story and no one reads the afterword, so you need to move that to the introduction. And so anyway, here's what happened. Like I said, I was in the very beginning of starting the podcast. I was kind of coming out of that period in time. I started to talk about at the beginning of the podcast. I was 21 or 22, and I was listening to Hay House radio. I was the only one my age that like I felt like even knew what Hay House was at the time. Like I was like, this is so cool, but like I'm the only one in my generation who knows about this, is how I felt. And I was listening to Hay House Radio. I hear an advertisement for Writers Workshop in New York City. I lived in Michigan at the time. And my mentor, who I knew well, Gabby Bernstein, was going to be speaking there, as well as Chris Carr and a couple other people. And I was like, that's cool. They teach you how to write a book proposal, which, as you know, is a pretty tedious thing that I had no clue how to do. There's lots of parts to it. It takes many months to complete because you have to do chapter abstracts for every single chapter, where you basically have to plot out the entire book, and then also things like competitive analysis, promotional strategy. There's just a lot to it.
It's harder than writing the book.
It really is. And it takes months, right? It's not something you can like do in a week. It like takes a long time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what I didn't know, I ended up asking to go to this for my birthday, and my mom gifted me this conference and a trip to New York City. I went, I had a great time. I got to hang out with Gabby. It was fantastic. I met one of my best friends who lives now in my neighborhood here in the East Village, Sasha, and it was great. I had a great time at the conference. I didn't realize that there was a contest associated with it where, like I said, they teach you how to write a book proposal. They teach you a lot about publishing. And then so you actually utilize what you learned. There's a contest where there's 3 prizes. One is a book deal with Hay House. And then the 2 second prizes are 2 self-publishing deals with their
the Balboa Press.
Yes.
Yeah.
Their like self-publishing division. So anyway, so I was like, all right, this is cool. We had like 9 months to submit it. And they were very clear about, do not submit a half-baked proposal. It has to have all the parts, and do not submit it late. Like, we just will not look at it. So I was like, okay. And I had this idea for this book I was going to write. And I got home and I kind of put it off, and I wasn't really feeling inspired by that idea. And like 3 months passed, and I was like, oh, I don't know what to do. And then like 4 months passed, 5 months passed, and I like nothing hadn't started. I was like, maybe I'll get to it, whatever. And then one day I was just like, this is stressing me out. I don't think I can do this. And so I remember I was home visiting my mom, and I like went into her office and I was like, hey, I'm not going to do that thing you got me for my birthday. I don't have time for it, and it's stressing me out. And she's like, okay, honey, that's great. Like, focus on a real job. Like, don't worry about that, And I was like, okay, great. So I just took it off my plate, and there was a week before the due date, and I was thinking about it nonstop. I was like, I wonder who from the conference will win. I really wish I had an idea. Too bad. Like, that would have been cool. I just couldn't stop thinking about it. And then one morning I woke up and I was journaling. Actually, I was writing, and I was like, I could maybe write a book about this. Like, is there a book about journaling? Maybe I could write a book about this. So I got flushed with this idea, but I only had less than a week. I had like 5 days to do this proposal, and I was working full time. I was like doing the podcast. I had a million things that I couldn't just like stop doing and like work full days on the book proposal. So I woke up at 5 a.m. and I would work till about 9 a.m. on the proposal. And then I would finish work about 6. I'd come home and I'd work till about midnight, 1 a.m. I'd sleep for like 4 hours, and I'd wake up at 5 a.m. and I'd do it all over again for like 4 days. And then the day it was due came, and I was really close to getting the proposal done. I was like super close, but I hadn't finished some of those parts that were so crucial, like the promotional analysis, like the little things, but like I just couldn't do it. And it was 11:30, and it was due at midnight that night. And I was just like, they were so clear about not submitting it half done. So I was like, I'm not even going to like put this in. And even if I tried to get it done, like I only have a half an hour, like, and I was so tired. So I just went to bed, and I just like was like laying in my bed. I was like, if I only had like a little bit more time, maybe I could do it. And I was just feeling really sad. And then I remembered Hay House is in California, so they're on West Coast time. So I had 3 more hours.
Oh my God.
So I grabbed my computer, and I remember I like made some tea, and I like got it done and made it happen. I submitted it with like 12 minutes to go.
Oh my God.
And that was it. I submitted it. And then you didn't find out if you won for like a month. And I just forgot about it. I was so unattached. I think non-attachment is something that is really important. And so, yeah, I was super unattached. I was teaching yoga I was at this like weird yoga event inside of a football stadium, weirdly. I was like working it. And I got out of that, and I had like a million text messages that I had won, and I had missed a call from Hay House, and I totally realized it was the day that they were announcing it. Like I was just like, oh God, it's probably my mom calling. I was like, what is happening? Did someone die? And then I had won this, and it was the craziest feeling. It really, I don't think everyone needs this, but for me, it really legitimized these things I was doing as a hobby, my blog, podcast. I just needed something that like I could explain to my parents of like, this is that weird stuff I do, outside of work. And they were able to be like, oh, keep doing that. When they like saw my book in Barnes & Noble, they were able to be like, oh, this is like legit. Like, this is cool. And my other stuff was legit. It was cool, and I enjoyed it, and that's fine. But for me, it was this wink from the universe of like, keep going, keep doing,
yeah.
Stop. I really was. So it came at the perfect time for me.
Oh my gosh, I love that story, and I so relate to you because my book deal also came at a point that I was like, am I really going to be able to make this a living? Like, maybe this is just going to be like my weird hobby. And I think the universe is like, if you were meant to do something, is like, okay, we're going to like put it in a contract, because that's the only way that, like, you know, for some of us, because we live in such a like world where you have to have like a job description and this and that, and like kind of like blogging and podcasting also for, you know, paying the bills and all of this, it's just oftentimes not enough. So I think having that book just like adds to everything. So congratulations.
Yeah.
I'm like so happy and excited for you, even though it was a year ago, but that's just so amazing.
Oh my gosh. Well, likewise. Thank you so much. And I can't wait to hear about, I want you to tell me your story with the book, but I guess we can just save that for my podcast.
Yes. Yeah.
I can't wait to hear and get to know you more. And I'm so excited to have you on mine.
Yes. Yeah. I think it's like so many people that I come across now who have these like more creative endeavors. It's just rare to see now people who are able to make a career of it, because it just takes a lot of like stepping into the unknown and a lot of like taking actions that just scare you, which is something a lot of times creative people are not as good at naturally. And you obviously had to like really like push upon yourself to like send it in, and, you know, obviously it was a scary thing to do, and that's what allowed you to make your creativity your business. So do you work now on your book and things like that full time, or do you still have another job as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't. I still have a full-time job. I do everything on the side, and it might not be forever, but it's what I do right now. There's this book by Elizabeth Gilbert that came out a couple of years ago called Big Magic. Did you read it?
Yeah, someone was actually just telling me about this book, and I think the exact same thing you're going to say. She said the same thing, but I'll let you say it. Let's see if it's the same.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So there's this part in the book where she says that up until her big hit, her biggest book, Eat, Pray, Love, came out, she always had a full-time job along with writing. And of course, Eat, Pray, Love was this like massive success. Julia Roberts played her in the movie, you know, like it was huge. So she was able to leave her job. But throughout that time, she never wanted to put the pressure on her creative work that she loved to make her money and to sustain her and pay her rent. And when I heard that, I was like, oh, it's okay that I make my money in a different way, primarily a different way. And it made me, because before I was like, oh, well, I'm not a real podcaster if I'm not supporting myself 100% through that, or I'm not a real writer or whatever. And it's like, well, the people I know who are podcasters, none of them make their money fully doing that. Like a lot of comedians who are podcasters also do comedy, you know, like a lot of people who have podcasts also like sell an online course or, you know, do something else, you know, so coach, whatever. And it really, really helped me to be like, whatever you do to make money is great. And being an entrepreneur is fantastic, but you can be an entrepreneur and have a full-time job, and that doesn't make you any less of an entrepreneur. And it took away a lot of my shame. And now I talk about this because I want people to know that like that person you see on Instagram, you have no idea. They could be supported by a spouse or their parents, or they could have a full-time job and I never like get into my full-time job a ton. And I don't talk about it like all the time just because it's like, oh, it's this thing that I do. It's fine. But like when I'm doing this other stuff, that's not the thing I want to talk about all the time. I want to talk about these things that really fill me up. And that's the only reason why I don't, you know, talk about it fully and, you know, whatever. But I think it is important that I'm talking about it at all, because I want people to know that they can start something. Anyone can start something. It is challenging to do it all. And it is challenging to, like, I had to work a ton this week, and I have to, you know, work in an odd time sometimes. But if you want to, you can. And it's just about figuring that out, I guess.
I love that. And I think you just sharing that gave permission to so many people listening right now who are like, yes, I want to blog, I want a podcast, I want to write a book, but like, how am I going to sustain myself, to like just take that responsibility off and be like, you can still do those things and not have to worry about it. And I think that allows you to just create from this like place of pure enjoyment, which is really what it's all about.
I completely agree.
So yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And it's totally true. Like a lot of people on Instagram, like either work or like they don't have to work or so many things. So we only just see like a really small piece of the whole puzzle.
Yeah. And I think it's just, I need to be reminded of that
Amazing.
all the time.
So for people listening, do you have any like journaling prompts that you recommend for accessing your highest self? So really we talk a lot about like finding like your calling and your truth and like, why are you here on this planet? Like, what's your purpose? How can you serve the world? So do you have any like journaling prompts you recommend for that?
Yeah. I mean, I think just kind of like writing to your highest self and seeing what that part of you would say. Like, I know the times when I am my most enlightened self. And I know the times, like I was saying, when I'm definitely not. Those are probably easier to determine. Mm-hmm. And I think just saying, if you ask yourself a good question, you'll get a good answer from your highest self. And if you ask yourself a bad question, you're going to get a bad answer. So what I mean by that, if you're like, why is everything so terrible? Your brain will go ahead and find things to support that statement. But if you ask a positive framed question, like, how can I improve my life? Your brain will find ways for you to improve your life, right? Mm-hmm. So it's all about framing the question. So I would say, I would ask your highest self, your intuition, whatever. I would ask, what can I do to access this more? And just kind of like free write on that, set a timer or give yourself, I have to write for this full page or I have to write for 5 whole minutes or, just think about it if you really don't want to write. One of my good friends, do you know Jordan Bach?
No.
Anyway, my friend Jordan, he like always walks around New York City voice journaling. So he'll just like make voice memos for himself. So like you could do that, if you're driving or walking. And I think that is a great way. That's a great question to start with.
I love that. And do you recommend often like going back and like reading or re-listening to the things that you had written, or just kind of like let it be a cathartic experience?
Yeah, ever since the book has come out, I've been getting this question a lot. And I think it depends. I mean, what I do is I think no, because a lot of times what I'm doing with journaling is it's the most raw and real that I can be. It's my most vulnerable self. I think we're constantly wearing masks in the world. And even with someone really safe, like a close friend or a therapist, even, I was not being truly fully myself. I was hiding in some way because I want to be liked, right? Mm-hmm. And with my journal, I was finally able to say those really raw things like that I was afraid to say in the world. And because we have this little fear of judgment always. And so I don't think it's necessary to go back through and read your journals, but what I do is I go back through and I kind of mine it for any gems. So like when I finish a book, a journal, I'll kind of look through it, mine it for any ideas or important things that I want to like have that conversation, or that was an interesting day, or to like kind of look at my own growth. I'll kind of flip through and then I'm done with it, and then I think get rid of it.
I love that. And I think it's like a beautiful thing to like go back to something you journaled like years before, where you're like, it wouldn't even trigger something because you're so different, and just to be like, oh my God, like look how far I've come.
Yeah, it's always fun to find stuff like that. And I think the only thing I often caution people with that is make sure you're not writing for your future self. Like the big distinction I always say in journaling, the difference between journaling and just like writing an email is that it's exclusively for you. You're not writing to someone else. You're not having that fear of judgment from another person or even your future self of like, I don't want to look back on this. And like, you want to be able to be as raw and real and vulnerable as you can be. Absolutely. For it to like be beneficial. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll share with you on your podcast, so everyone can keep listening. The journaling exercise I did to manifest my boyfriend, like my soulmate. And it was all through something that I journaled. So we'll talk about that next. Well, thank you so much for being on the Highest Self podcast and sharing with us. I'm sure everyone has taken away so much from it. It's making me want to go start journaling right now.
Oh my gosh, me too. I'm so happy to meet you and to have you on my podcast. I think that we should just like carry on this conversation and keep the momentum going, and people can listen to you on that.
Yes, absolutely. And where can listeners find you?
So I'm just, like a Google away. I'm at Katie Dalebout everywhere on Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat. I'm not. My podcast is called Let It Out, hosted by me. My book is also called Let It Out. And I would love to hang out with you guys. I have this thing on my website. If you want to sign up for my email list, you get the quick start guide. So it's, I like say to my Oprah voice, but like Katie's favorite things. And it's just a list of all of the videos I love, podcasts I love, places I love, articles, whatever. It's just like a bunch of links that I enjoy.
Perfect. Well, we'll definitely all check that out. And thank you so much. And looking forward to continuing the conversation on the Let It Out podcast.
Can't wait. Thank you so much for having me, my friend.
Thank you. Namaste.
Namaste.
How amazing was that episode? I am feeling so inspired to start journaling regularly. It's something that I always start and I'm never consistent with, so I really want to do it regularly, and I hope you feel the same. Thank you so much, Katie, for sharing your wisdom with us. And if you enjoyed this episode, I would love to give you a free gift for writing a review in the iTunes store. All you have to do is write a nice review, send me a screenshot, email it over to me at sahara@eatfeelfresh.com. And I will send you back a free gift, which is the unreleased first half of my book, Eat Right for Your Mind Body Type. This is the first book I wrote about Ayurveda. It's all about merging Ayurveda with modern nutritional science. It's a book that is never going to be released because it's something that I wrote and then I ended up getting a different book deal for, but it's something that's still so near and dear to my heart. And I want to share it with you for free. And all you have to do is write a review for this podcast and I will shoot it over to you. So again, my email is Sahara, Sahara @eatfeelfresh.com. Send your review to me and I will send you back the first half of my unreleased book in an ebook form. And I hope you enjoy it. Thank you guys so much. And again, hop on the Mind Body Balancers Facebook group. That's where we discuss what we liked in the episode. It's an amazing community with serious light workers in there. And I'd love to hear more about your journaling experiences. Namaste.